Well, good to see you, my brother.
Good to see you too, brother Thaddeus.
How are you feeling on this fine day when justice abounds?
When justice abounds and what is righteous has been returned.
I'm proud. I've always been proud of being the top African-American show on YouTube. And today we're gonna really demonstrate that we deserve that spot, you know. So yeah, how long have you been black?
I mean, ever since I saw the good money in it. Ever since oh man. There's a lot of angles I can go on this.
Wait a second. I thought it was a privilege to not be black.
Yeah, but then it changed.
Wait, what? There's privileges attached to being black? You can get shit for it?
You can, I mean, if you bust out the dashiki, certain organizations might turn the cameras on and treat you like a historical hero.
Really? Does it matter how we talk? Does it matter sort of like the tone of our voice or maybe the accent and particular inflections?
If you acquire a certain affectation, people might believe that history is repeating itself.
Now, back in the day when I had hair, it was like half Jewish hair. So I was not quite a fro, but if I had put a little product in it or something, I probably could have had a Jew fro. And I feel like if I did that and had maybe some like scholarly glasses, and then I wore like a little skinny black and white suit, you know, someone might confuse me for Malcolm X, in which case I think I'd get paid, right?
Yeah. And
yeah,
we were talking about this with reparations, right? If anybody denies our blackness, subject us to a DNA test. Bring out the rulers, start measuring ourselves, you know,
Have you not been cognizant of the career of one Sean King?
Yeah, exactly, dude. He played the
how many millions of dollars has he made? And for a man of dubious, shall we say, heritage, not to be a racialist or anything, but you know, it's his claim that he's black, and many people dispute that, including our good friend Hotep Jesus. And actually, I think Hotep was like the first on that case. I think he was the first sort of prominent person to call out Sean King. But anyway, Sean King is arguably lighter than I am. I mean, his skin is no darker than mine, and I am a white MF. So my point is, so long as you have the hair, because Sean's got the lines going in his hair, and he's got the little pencil mustache going, you know. And so long as you speak in a particular way, the correct tone and inflection, and most importantly, if you have the right politics, you can write your own ticket. And that's what we've been seeing recently in the great state of Tennessee, home of the Confederacy, but also of race grifters recently.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up the Confederacy again. It is Confederate History and Heritage Month, and we are celebrating.
Are you that black Confederate guy, that one black Confederate guy who does like speaking tours? Yeah. Yes. So once again, my brother, we are confronting the history of this country because we are unable to speak about race in this country without discussing slavery, Jim Crow, and redlining. I have never once heard an anti-racist speak more than 3 sentences without referencing something before 1965, which tells you something. I'm guessing it tells you something that things might have changed a bit since 1965, in particular around race relations in this country, or what's called race relations, the relations of social constructs. And again, my brother Justin Pearson, this Democratic state legislator in Tennessee, who along with 2 of his colleagues led a march around the Capitol building while the legislature was in session. I believe they were discussing a gun control bill, and this march was in opposition to guns and was in favor of gun control. which is another interesting thing. I'd like to have Justin on the show to discuss the history of Black people and gun control, and we'll see who's black then, my brother.
Yeah. What did Fred Hampton have to say about gun control? What did Malcolm X have to say about gun control?
Yeah, well, Malcolm, of course, was in the business of leading a revolution of self-defense, which it was. He wasn't interested in taking anything of white people, but he knew that to establish a separate Black nation would require some violence. The violence would befall the people who took on that project. So of course, you had to have guns in any revolution. Any actual revolutionary knows that. Not these cosplaying revolutionaries we've been seeing in places like Tennessee, but really everywhere on the streets of America since about the time that Trayvon Martin almost beat a man to death and was shot for it. I'm sounding like far right now. I'm sounding like one of these like AM radio conservatives right now, but it's true. I am so disgusted, so past disgusted with, I guess you could call it Black politics or race politics over the last 10 years, that I see these things so differently now. And this is quite a thing for me, because since I was very little, and I've written about this, I have not identified with Black people, but I've always just had tremendous affection and admiration for much of Black culture, especially sort of what you see in popular culture. And I grew up about half my childhood in a very mixed neighborhood. There's actually about a majority Black, and my schools are all very, very integrated, and in the 70s and 80s, and that's who I was. And I was going to write a whole book about the civil rights movement. And when Trayvon Martin almost beat to death George Zimmerman and was shot to death for it, yes, it was a complete act of self-defense. Trayvon was the aggressor. There is absolutely no doubt about it. If you don't believe me, go watch Joel Gilbert's film on this subject. And I had him on the show a few years ago. And if you watch that film and you listen to the interview, it's just absolutely indisputable that Trayvon Martin jumped this guy and was about to kill him. He was slamming his head on the cement when Zimmerman pulled out his gun and shot him.
A cursory glance of the trial will give you that information, not even a full documentary. Yeah,
but I know, but it's even deeper than that. I mean, all the reasons that Trayvon was absolutely guilty and Zimmerman is completely innocent, are just, it's amazing. The documentary is like an hour and a half of just stacking evidence against Trayvon Martin. Is unbelievable. And then, as of that moment, well, when that happened, I cried. Not because George Zimmerman was going to prison, but because this Black boy was shot to death by some racist in Florida. So that was me just 10 years ago. And now I sound like, what's that guy's name? Mark Levin?
Sure, any of them.
Whatever, yeah. Well, like
one of them.
The more harder edge ones, the ones who are not on Fox, like the serious, I want to say they are.
You're in between Mark Levin and Nick Fuentes. You're not total race science yet, but I mean,
boom. Yeah. Well, I mean, right now I'm in there, but the rest of the time, as you know, because we talk about this a lot, since you have a similar affliction or did, what used to be called negrophilia, which I want to bring back, by the way. It's a term that needs to be revived. But so that's who I was. I was a negrophile. And then Mike Brown happened. And oh boy, I wanted to kill cops. This was time for open rebellion. I was talking a lot about killing cops in that year, the year of Mike Brown in Ferguson, and I was weeping at these videos, many of which were legitimate videos of police shooting a man to death that didn't need to be shot to death. But turned out Michael Brown in Ferguson was total bullshit, and that he was totally reaching into the cop car to grab the guy, trying to grab the cop's gun. That was proven, shown by none other than Eric Holder and the Obama Justice Department. So, and while this is happening, BLM, Black Lives Matter, is blowing up, and I see Black Lives Matter posters in every window of my neighborhoods where I am, which is all, liberal, basically neighborhoods. And I started to see that it was, and this was in large part with the help of my friend Camila Foster, who had been on this tip for a long time and was quite aware of the amount of race hustling that was going on. I did not know how deep this, I'm going to call it race hustling, anti-racist stuff had penetrated into academia, into what I was doing. I was an academic at that time. How damn near every professor you will come across anywhere will have the same narrative about the civil rights movement, Black power, Black people in general, Black culture, right? They all say the same things. I had no, and it's almost all mythology. So the civil rights movement is very, very different than how we imagine it. It was a few thousand people who were ever active in the civil rights movement. 99% of African Americans had nothing to do with it. And in fact, a large percentage of them were totally opposed to it. It goes on. I mean, there's just one myth after another. I mean, segregation was a boom time, especially late Jim Crow, when the civil rights movement happened in the 1950s. You had thriving business districts in every city in the Deep South that was dominated by Black capitalists, store owners, business owners, Black-owned whole business districts that were thriving. The Negro Leagues were competing quite well, thank you very much, with the major leagues, and people loved it, meaning African Americans loved it. But of course, we're not allowed to say any of this. Not to mention the relationship with the Democratic Party, who called for the cops to come into the neighborhoods, who called for mandatory minimum sentences for drug dealers, who called for the death penalty for drug dealers, who called explicitly and literally for mass incarceration of Black people. They said this. Black civil rights leaders and preachers in Harlem, New York in the 1960s. This is Michael Javon Fortner's work. The mythology just, of course, we're not allowed to know that. It's all the mass incarceration, police brutality. That's all a racist plot to eliminate Black bodies. And I'm telling you, Michael, every single professor you will meet believes that. They believe that. And there's absolutely no evidence. In fact, there's nothing but counter evidence to this. I mean, there's just been books after books after books published by scholarly presses that disprove this thesis. But it doesn't matter. These people are immune to it. So now we come to this Justin Pearson cat. We have now video of him in 2016 running, I love this, running for student government at Bowdoin College in a place called Maine. Bowdoin College, the tuition is in excess of $50,000 per year. That doesn't include room and board. And it is, of course, populated entirely by the elite of the elite of the elite of the United States of America. These are children who are being trained to run the country, quite literally, and the world. And I'll bet you anything that he might have gotten a scholarship to get in there. In fact, I'd bet everything that he got a huge scholarship. In fact, I'd be surprised if he didn't get a free ride. A Black kid from Tennessee. Yeah, so when he's running for student government at Bowdoin College in 2016, he's like, what did somebody say on Twitter about what he looked like? A character, Clayton, not Clayton Bigsby. Yeah.
That's pushing it, man. That's pushing it. I mean, he just looked like a square. He just looked like a square dude. Like, he looked
Clayton
like
Bigsby was the I forget Clayton Bigsby. I'm totally he was Urkel. He was a Cosby kid.
Urkel.
And
Urkel or Carlton. People call him Carlton.
You're about to play it. Carlton.
Yeah.
Carlton. I was thinking of Carlton. He's Carlton. Mm-hmm. Go ahead and play it.
Yeah. Man, I want to forgive him too because, like, I mean, I think both personas that he has are an act. You know, he's just trying to, navigate two different avenues in politics, and the political world changed a lot over the last 6-7 years. So, the grift changed with it. So again, this is yeah. So this is him in college. I'm sorry. I'm
2016.
2016. Yeah.
You have it?
Yeah, I do. I was gonna share it differently, but this is This is both personas now juxtaposed.
Yeah.
Justin J. Pearson, and I'm running for president of BSG. There are a few reasons that we're running this campaign this year. One has to do with representation. How can we represent all voices in a conversation? I wanted to do this by partnering with organizations from the Bowdoin Democrats to the Bowdoin Republicans. I want to bring together different voices, dissenting voices, voices that may be more liberal or more conservative, in order that we can reach a point of sort of the radical middle.
Seemed like the NRA and gun lobbyists might win. But oh, that was good news for us. I don't know how long this Saturday in the state of Tennessee might last. But oh, we have good news, folks. We've got good news that Sunday always comes.
He does it well, though. He does both very well.
Yeah,
a very appealing little college Republican there at the beginning, and now he's a very appealing, Malcolm X figure. He does it really well. Although it's sort of a cross between Malcolm X and MLK. But
yeah, he's skinny. He's skinny and tall, so people say Malcolm, and he's got the glasses, so that people say Malcolm.
No, but he's clearly imitating a black preacher, and his father turns out, by the way, you know what? His father is a black preacher,
and he is too. He is preaching at the Unitarian Universalist churches.
And I was almost going to tweet this because, in a way, this is all that this shit is about. I said he's imitating his daddy. That's it. I mean, that's it. That's his father. It's all his kid's doing. Ultimately, we all want the approval of our parents, and especially our father, I think. He's just doing that. And the thing is, it happens to plug into a very particular politics that is advantageous in this moment. So it's also a career. He's got a career. He's a goddamn state legislator. And if he's got a future in Congress if he keeps it up, because MSNBC loves him. Yeah.
Man, he has a great future in Hallmark movies. If they ever do like a made-for-TV Martin Luther King thing and he puts on a little bit of weight, he'd be perfect. And it's funny to see the people who fell for this. Like, I think Stephen King fell for this. I think David Hogg fell for this on Twitter. Like, all the people saying, wow, it looks like 1963 is happening all over again. Wow, I'm witnessing history. Wow, this is so exciting. When it's like the most transparent act that anybody could ever give. It's a good one, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, the 1960s, when he represents Memphis. He's originally from there. I have a feeling he's not from the hood in Memphis. I will give him some. I mean, Memphis is about the hardest city in the whole damn country, so I give him credit for that, but I doubt he lives in the hard part of Memphis. Anyway, Memphis, 1960s. Again, we talked about how the left must refer to the deep past in any conversation about race. It's just amazing. On what other issue do we do that? None. I mean, how often do people talk about like the monetary policy in the 1950s was, they don't ever. Maybe not even foreign policy. Who references the Vietnam War, even, for God's sake? Like,
I mean, some libertarians will take everything back to the Wilson administration, but
right. Yeah. Those are not real. Those are not real people. Yeah.
You'll never see them on TV. You'll never see them on TV.
Yeah. Oh, fuck no. Yeah. So, 1960s, they refer back to the 1960s, the end of Jim Crow, of course, for obvious reasons. But one of the reasons is also that right after the mid-1960s, Memphis, Tennessee, like every city in the country pretty much, adopted black police officers. And then within a few years, majority black police force in Memphis, Tennessee. And then, of course, the city government also. There were city council members who were black in the late 60s and early 70s in Memphis. And then boom, 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 boom. Guess what we have now? It's solid. I think it's majority or even completely black city council, city government in Memphis. Pretty damn close. Or at least, I mean, it certainly has been since the 1960s. It's been a black run city. And of course, the police chiefs have all been black too. And, go to Memphis. Well, who killed Tyree Nichols? We know about the cops in Memphis and what color they are. Right. And this is all black Democrats, 100% up and down since the 1960s. So when are we going to take accountability for that, left? You got what you wanted. You need
to go to unregisteredacademy.com and take our Malcolm X course. This is what really needs to happen. Because, we spent all this time speculating at the end of it. Like, what would Malcolm X think of Detroit? What would Malcolm X think of Memphis after studying his speeches? And you cover a bunch of... Is that in that course where you have him where he's debating some of those other black intellectuals, and they use like the
Yes.
the
This is stuff that's-
affectation, the coastal
This is stuff that
affectation.
even, yeah, this is stuff that no one has ever seen. I mean, it's there, it's available, but like gets almost no views. No one cares about this, but it's when Malcolm's at his very best, I think. He's debating these very elite black academics who are in the Ivy League, and they have literally British accents. We're talking about the early 60s. These guys, a lot of people forget, like the Ivy League set actually adopted British accents that went out of fashion in the 1960s, but they were anyway. So he's arguing with these guys, these black American guys who professors and the like with British accents, and he's a kid from the hood, true hood, never went to college, was illiterate when he went to prison, and he taught himself not how to read, but how to understand the damn alphabet so he could read, and then became Malcolm X from us. So he like, this guy gives no shits, right, about these liberal elite motherfuckers who he considers to be the Uncle Toms of his time. And yeah, they're complete. They don't know what to do with him. They don't know what to do with him because he's identifying them as simply the pawns of not the white man. He's not stupid. Malcolm's analysis was, you are pawns of the white liberal man. And in fact, he ends up just saying liberal. He ends up making fun of liberals, not making fun of them, but pointing out how they're the ones who ultimately will stab you in the back while making you think that they're your friend.
Yeah.
So Malcolm was, I mean, and
when I saw that clip of Bowdoin, of Pearson and Bowdoin College with that affectation, that professional Andrew Yang kind of affectation, all I could think about was going back to the 60s, and he would probably have that coastal fake British accent if you were in those Ivy Leagues at that time. Like it's
without a doubt. Without a doubt. And he would end up working in the State Department on African policy. I guarantee it, which is what those guys did. By the way, a lot of those guys that Malcolm was debating, the black intelligentsia, they ended up working for the State Department, trying to convince Africans to join with the United States against the Soviet Union. Totally. Cold War liberals. I mean, empire, vicious neocolonialism, often against masses of black and brown people were talking, and these people were in league with them, and that's still the case today. Justin Pearson is a member of what party? The Democrat Mass Murdering Party, the Vietnam War Party. I mean, the Hiroshima Party. You know, the sanctions against Iranian civilians so they can't get medical care when they have cancer party. You know, and then we have it's the AFRICOM Party, the African Command Party.
Yeah. Man, he would be talking about sanctioning Uganda right now for their LGBTQ policies.
Right. Oh my goodness. I mean, the stuff that the United States has done to Africa, to the third world, and to brown and black, you know, the Democratic Party, led by the Democratic Party in every single damn instance. And this guy's a member of that party. Excuse me, Justin. Excuse me, man. I'm sorry. Like, if you're going to play race politics and be identifying people as black and not black, you're not black. You're a liberal. You're part of that religion. You're part of that conquering religion. So Malcolm X called this out. He was the first one to do that. And no one has done it since. They stopped calling out, except for people like Candace Owens on the right, who are not interested in the rest of Malcolm's critique and analysis and prescriptions. They just want people to leave the Democratic Party and join the Republican Party, because guess which empire they belong to. So there's no Malcolm X anymore. But there hasn't even been anybody saying these things, you know, except for me. Like, as far as I know, I mean, and a couple of my, yeah, to some extent. I mean, no, of course there are some. There's a handful of like black intellectuals, but they're generally not known. Yeah. And I know all five of them. You know, they're like, it's truly like that number. But yeah.
Yeah, so I want to play this too. Kamala Harris went to the Tennessee state legislature and, you know, brought forth the affectation a little bit herself too.
Oh, goodness.
It wasn't about the three of these leaders. It was about who they were representing. It's about whose voices they were channeling. Understand that. And is that not what a democracy allows? A democracy says you don't silence the people. You do not stifle the people. You don't turn off their microphones when they are speaking about the importance of life and liberty. That is not what a democracy does.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say she went into her preacher thing. I mean, she does her black scent at times. I wouldn't say that was Kamala doing her black scent thing, but
Yeah.
she's certainly being a demagogue,
Mm-hmm.
and which is all this stuff is. All woke liberal politics these days is 100% demagoguery, appeal to the emotions, basically, of women, particular kinds of women, and that's the lifeblood of liberalism is basically middle-aged and young women with a particular sensibility. But
before that, actually,
the dishonesty of it all is what really, I just can't. It's too much for me. There's no, when liberals talk about race, every word out of their mouth is wrong, is false, is a lie or a myth. It's amazing. I mean, they can't say a single thing that is true about race.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to say, let's think about like the issue that inspired all this, right? It's a massively young crowd of college students, essentially, and high school students, even, like, demanding gun control. And you saw it a little bit in that clip. And yeah, so the Tennessee Three went to the state legislature, and while they're doing, conducting their sessions, shouting into a bullhorn, leading chants of protesters. And we wanted to talk about this in relationship to the trans issue also, but like young people are being mobilized into being shock troops right now. And they're just falling hook, line, and sinker for every little psyop that happens.
And who else? You know who else mobilized young people to be shock troops?
Yeah.
Well, not just Hitler. Also Mao, very famously.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's and you and I have talked about this. I mean, to me, contemporary liberal politics is a form of Maoism. And people need to talk about that more. I mean, people need to be talking about the lineage back to Mao. It's the style, it's the tactics, it's the strategy, it's the overall philosophy. It's all Maoism. But anyway,
it's really it's a cultural revolution for sure. It's you get the young people, you just hypercharge them with all this rhetoric, and you demonize anything of the past. You destroy all of the culture of the past. No reverence. You give them a feeling of importance. You label groups of society as good and groups of society as bad. Red and black. And I mean, James Lindsay does have a good analysis on this with the trans movement, in that joining the LGBTQ movement and joining these political causes is a good way for a white person to rid themselves of their white guilt and to join an oppressed class and to be on the right side of history and feel important for once.
It's all about the rewriting of the whole narrative about race and black people in this country, which began in the World War II and then really took off in the 60s. People didn't think this way at all before 1945. I mean, not at all. And in fact, not even much before 1970. But there was a whole sea change in the way we see these issues, and the whole narrative of this unbroken chain of oppression and victimhood, and that's it, sort of just took root in the 70s and then has now blossomed so that you're now commanded to believe it. And if you believe anything, any variation on that, what happened to me happens to you. You get tossed out of polite society. You're not allowed to be a professor anymore, to teach children anymore, or anything like that. It's now become, as John McWhorter has said quite brilliantly, it's become a religion, or a system of religious thought. So that's where we are. I don't know what it's gonna take to deprogram liberals on this. The good news is that people on the left, the real left, the radical left, the socialist Marxist left, they're not into this stuff. They get it. They agree with us on this generally. But it's really when you get to cult level religious thinking like that among 50 million or so people, 60 million, somewhere in there. I would say 90% of Democrats think that way. And what is it, like 60 or 70 million voted in the last presidential election? So it's around 50 million, something like that, people in this country believe that stuff, hook, line, and sinker, completely. What are you going to do with that block? What you're going to do is you're going to leave. You're going to leave and go live somewhere else. Unless you want to be crazy. I don't know. I don't know what to do, but that's where we are.
Yeah. that Riley Gaines swimmer was attacked by a trans mob. A mob of young activists in Purdue University, which is a conservative engineering school. This is not a liberal arts school. Michael Knowles was shouted down by these shock troops. And it looked exactly like Evergreen College did 6 years ago or so, which is, a Pacific Northwest liberal arts school. And it's shocking to see it play out. Here's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
It didn't look that bad. There wasn't people with baseball bats.
No, it was about Michael Knowles, not about the. No, I don't. I completely hate the people who attacked him, but I also think he's. There's some things to be said about him. I'm not pleased with him right now because he deliberately misgendered Deirdre McCluskey on Twitter the other day. They had a debate. Deirdre, who's 80 years old, dropped out of the debate at the last minute, which she actually did with us for an event once, not long ago. So we know it wasn't political because, it was just she's old and she's 80 and she has bad health. And anyway, so I couldn't believe this because she transitioned, I think, in 1997, and she has been famous as Deirdre McCluskey always. I don't think anyone had ever heard of her when she was Donald, I think her name was, McCluskey. Right. So, even like right-wing libertarians and stuff who hate this whole trans thing, they totally admire her and always have accepted her as a woman. It's not even a question. So he's not understanding, I think, that there's this whole wing of the right, I suppose, that totally but admires Deirdre McCluskey and completely accepts her as a woman. And I've seen this, so I know it's true. And she did an amazing thing on Dave Rubin, the Rubin Report. This interview she did with him was just one of the best discussions about the trans issue I've ever seen, probably the best, and everyone should go watch that. So Michael Knowles starts calling her out on Twitter like an 80-year-old woman, and saying he, him, referring to Deirdre as he, him. I get it if it's someone like Dylan Mulvaney, who's clearly a grifter and 5 seconds ago announced that they were a woman, and I get that. I do it too. I make fun of those people too. But this is very serious.
It's more about rejecting the ideology of transgenderism entirely, being 1,000% ideologically consistent at all times.
Sure. No, I hate the transgender movement and ideology. Hate to my bones. It's actually a repudiation of everything I believe. I hate it. No, but there are, I think, so Deirdre's one, and then I have an ex-student who also transitioned when right after college, she went from Karen to Kyle. And after Kyle transitioned and became Kyle, I saw him a couple of years later, and it was just immediately apparent this person was way happier. Just way happier. She was miserable as a woman in college and just blossomed and you could just tell very comfortable in his skin as a man. And same with Deirdre. When I was in Deirdre's apartment, I interviewed her in her apartment, and she was just completely lovely. And she just seemed like a woman to me, really. And I'm skeptical of this stuff. I don't like a lot of the trans stuff. A lot of trans people who are everywhere around here, by the way, in the Bay Area. Oh my God. Truly, every time you go shopping, you see a trans person. It's amazing because they often are cashiers here for some reason. Although I actually have a theory about why. No, these are genuine people. And I don't see why not to believe them. There's nothing to suggest in the behavior and experiences of Kyle and Deirdre. There's nothing in there to suggest that they're not completely authentic. They had nothing to gain from it either. Whereas nowadays people do have something to gain from identifying as trans, which is the problem with it, but not when they transition. This is 15, 30 years ago. No, it was only pain to be trans then. It was not a good thing. There was no reason to be trans then. And so to do this deliberately and just to sort of, wow, it's disgusting to call her he and him. My respect for Michael Knowles plummeted when I saw that. And I kind of wanted to get in his face about it. I didn't, but it's pretty stupid and gross, I think. And mean, unnecessarily mean.
Back to the shock troops hypothesis.
Yeah, man. The Maoist Red Guard.
Yeah. The thing is, the more I learn, the more I see that public school is really just watered down communism. And by the time you get to college, you learn the real communism. And so like for the most part,
it's actually fascism. It's fascism.
Yeah.
It's not communism. No, really,
Okay.
because they're mostly training you to work in a corporation, a privately held corporation, not for the state. That's the difference. It's fairly important, but anyway, it is fascism. Also, it started in Prussia. I mean, the public school system here is of Prussian origin, right? Which gave us the Nazis famously.
Yeah.
So.
Well, so
anyway, sorry.
In this cultural milieu where school shootings are happening a lot, or at least psychologically, it feels like they're happening all the time. Like a school shooting happens and these liberal teachers are traumatized, and, you know, all these kids are traumatized, and everybody is like, they feel unsafe where they're at. And this becomes a time where the teachers can gather all the students together, and it's not political. This is about life. And they can talk about how evil and awful guns are and how this doesn't happen in other countries because America is the only place in the world with these stupid laws. I know this conversation has been happening over and over again for decades and decades, where, you know, a member of your community that you know and trust, your public school teacher, you know, makes this impassioned lecture after children are slaughtered to ingrain in you a political position. And the more times it keeps happening, the more you get solidified in your head. And I don't think there's any way that you could come out of public school really without a good foundation outside of public school where you believe in the Second Amendment.
The Democratic Party controls what is taught in public schools in this country. And that is for all public schools, including in red states, who have to abide by some curricular criteria and requirements. The education department, the federal education department, dictates some curriculum to all schools. They require it. And this is partly from the No Child Left Behind law of Bush, which became the Race to the Top program under Obama. So it was an attempt to centralize and nationalize the curriculum within all schools to make kids in Miami learn exactly the same thing that kids in Alaska learn. And of course, the deep state, the people who actually work inside the education department, you know, not the elected people, but the people who work there, the vast staff that oversees all this stuff, they're Democrats. Then, of course, the teachers union is part of basically a wing of the Democratic Party, and that's a national union. I mean, those are truly the shock troops of the Democratic Party. And yes, and so the Democratic Party has dictated what your kid learns. I mean, there's no Republican, conservative, libertarian, or socialist or anarchist line of thinking anywhere in any public school curriculum. Think about that. None. You never get exposed to those ways of thinking, those other ideologies, those other forms of analysis. You get no. I certainly didn't. I was in Berkeley. I was in a very, you know, like lefty progressive public high school. Nothing like that. I never was exposed to counter arguments, you know, alternative analyses of politics, of culture, of any of that stuff. It's all straight down the middle, Democratic Party liberal ideology. It's amazing. And so gun control is one thing. Can you imagine like a public school advocating, even in, I mean, I don't know, maybe in Alabama, some teachers get away with this. Probably they do. But like as a policy advocating for the lifting of all gun control laws, like no way. I mean, it would become a national, you know, scandal, et cetera, et cetera. So no, this is just the latest example of the liberal monopoly on cultural life. I mean, they control kind of how we live in a way, like what our kids experience, not to mention their control of the media that is fed to our kids. That's all Democratic Party too. I mean, it's the Democratic Party controls the way that things look and, you know, how they sound. And I mean, Netflix shows what they're like. That's all Democratic Party people. And they're all, obviously you saw this with BLM, like Netflix even transmitting Democratic Party messaging straight through. It's how most people consume their news from Democratic Party controlled news outlets like NBC, CBS, ABC. But I mean, it's an incredible ideological monopoly that liberals have in this country, and yet they pretend like they're being oppressed by these evil Republicans who somehow control them. It's anyway, so yes, it's just one giant fraud. And I can't see it any other way. I was a Democrat for a minute, like when I was in my 20s, I think. Yeah. And I voted for Walter Mondale in 1984. It was the first time I voted. And not proud of that. But yeah, so I once, even though I was raised in a family that saw the Democratic Party as liberal and therefore not sufficiently radical, because we were socialists, I still saw in the Democratic Party a lot of good people, good policies, a lot. I mean, I liked a lot of what the Democratic Party did. Maybe even myself today, thinking about some of those policies in the past, I'd be sympathetic to, although I don't think so. Actually, I don't think they've changed. I think I've changed, and I see them differently. And I see it as one giant fraud that has resulted in making Black people in this country, or a large portion of Black people in this country, wards of the state. You know, most Black kids in this country live with the state from the moment they wake up in the morning in a public housing project to the time they go to bed, you know, because they go to a public school. There's going to be a social worker visiting their mom, making sure that she does the proper things to get the welfare. They're going to be on welfare, most likely. They're going to be most likely in contact with the police, something that doesn't happen to white kids, you know, on the way to school, on the way back from school. They will personally know many, 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 many people who have been in prisons, state institutions. It's just nothing but the state all the time for most Black kids and most Black people. And that's Democratic Party policies. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. That was not the case in 1960. That was not the case. But it absolutely is the case that most Black people in this country are effectively wards of the state, and that's their doing. That's the liberals, that's the Democrats, they're doing. Yet they, of course, portray themselves as the party of, you know, the anti-racists, and, you know, they love Black people, and they're the champions of the Negro always. No. And it just seems obvious to me, and I don't see any other way around it.
Well, I remember Kamala Harris, right, when she was DA in California, going after truants and going after the parents of truants with jail time. And then I believe when she was a senator, she had an initiative to try to push K through 12 education to include preschool. So to get your kids even earlier. So don't wait till they're 5. Wait, you know, get them right when they're 3 years old.
Yeah, she says that she didn't actually prosecute any parents for not sending their kids to schools, but she threatened it. That's good enough for me. And I think she even said, or pretty much indicated, that this was targeting the very small Black population in San Francisco. There's a small but it's significant Black population in Hunters Point and Bayview, and in some of the public housing projects, which unfortunately are scattered throughout the city. It's one of the worst things that city planners have ever done. So there's a beautiful, very nice, otherwise neighborhoods. I used to live in one in San Francisco that there's a big housing project right in the middle of it. But anyway, so yeah, she did that. And think about this. So San Francisco, this tells you everything you want to know about the Democratic Party. San Francisco is currently, and has been for years, a city of two classes entirely. There's no middle class anymore in San Francisco. You can't be just a regular millionaire even and have a house in San Francisco. You have to be a multimillionaire. So it's a class of the very, very rich and the very, very poor. It's the people who live in the public housing projects that are still there, because they're liberal, so they got to have the housing projects for their Black people. So there's that. And then there's a little ghetto, as I said, Hunters Point and Bayview. So consequently, basically 100% of the crime that happens, of the violent crime that happens, is by African Americans in San Francisco. This is not the case everywhere. This is not nothing racist about this. That's just the case. The poor population is 99% Black, and poor people are the ones who do these kinds of crimes. That's just the way it is. Doesn't matter what color. But in San Francisco, that is the case. Well, so if your big ambition is to be the district attorney for San Francisco, your big ambition is to have a job whose only function is to put Black people in prison, because that's all she would do. I mean, she was just prosecuting, you know, violent crime, street criminals who, like, 99% were Black. There were some Latinos, But I mean, and so that's what she did for a living, and that was her big role as a champion of Black people somehow. Yeah, Malcolm X was right. Liberals like Kamala Harris and her friends in the Democratic Party, they make you think that they're your friend, but they're going to shank you when they get the chance. And that's what she did. There are lots of Black people in San Quentin and Folsom State Prison because of Kamala Harris. I mean, more than almost anybody else. This is the biggest prison system, or the second biggest prison system in the world, California. And she's responsible for a hefty percentage of the prisoners in those cages, almost all of whom are Black. So go figure.
Mm-hmm. Well, I also wanted to talk about how just devastatingly unserious our politicians are. Not only Justin J. Pearson, not only Kamala Harris, but Joe Manchin went to Ukraine, and I love Brad Paisley, but he brought along Brad Paisley, and this is what he had to say.
Come on. Here we go. Take me home, country roads, to the place I belong. What? Virginia. Terrible. Mountain Mama, take me home, country roads. You're too loud, Joe. Thank you guys for having us. God bless you all.
So what was this for?
Oh, there's another video that's longer, that's kind of boring, but he shook hands with Zelensky. He sat down with him.
Oh.
He said, there is no war that in my lifetime that is more just for the United States to be involved in. And I did think Brad Paisley would be a good segue, because Brad Paisley, of course, did solve racism in 2014 when he made that single with LL Cool J, Accidental Racist. If you remember that.
I forgot about that. No,
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Huh.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, I'm a Brad Paisley fan.
Mm-hmm.
And until he does this, I just wish musicians and actors wouldn't do politics, because I really love them when they do their thing, and it ruins a good time for me. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to think about their dumb politics when I listen to their music. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I don't know. Is this a segue into the leaks? The Pentagon
Yeah, I would
leaks?
like to talk about the leaks too. Saying, I mean, Joe Manchin is pledging his full support for Ukraine, and he's supposed to be the dissident in the Democratic Party. He's supposed to be the independent guy. But once again, just about every politician is completely on board with this. And yeah, the whistleblower was just perp walked today. The suspect, Jack Teixeira, 21-year-old guy. So these documents have been leaked out for months. These are official Pentagon documents. It's very suspicious how this came through, but official Pentagon documents revealing secrets about the Ukraine war had been on a Discord server of his friends for a long time, and then they had been on other like video gaming Discord servers, allegedly a Minecraft server, but and then obviously they're using this to like crack down on the internet again. Like they're saying that, free exchange on the internet and on these alternative apps is a national security threat. So they want to spy on those even deeper, which makes me think this might have been a planned leak, maybe. I don't know. And then, but the thing that disappoints me about this most of all is that legacy media and journalists, even comedians like Stephen Colbert, who is the regime spokesperson, are not interested at all in what the leaks actually have to say. They were just immediately interested in character assassinating and finding out who this whistleblower was, as opposed to like they're essentially running operations for the Pentagon in this instance, and not even curious about what these leaks had to say.
Sure, these are people who want to be rulers. I mean, that's who they are, right? And so anybody who aspires to be a ruler will be allergic to things like national security leaks, Defense Department leaks, things that hold together the country, at least in their mind, So several months ago, the Ukraine, Zelensky, started to announce and this is amazing that they did this, but they did. They started to announce that they were going to launch a massive counteroffensive against Russia in the spring. For months, they've been announcing this like daily. It's coming. We're coming. There's going to be a massive counteroffensive. The U.S. media has been talking about it. Everybody's been talking about it. And then for the last few months, Zelensky and other Ukrainian government officials have been touring the world begging governments, including the United States government, for weapons for this counteroffensive, because they have said increasingly, we don't have the guns to launch a counteroffensive against Russia. And people began to notice that the biggest cheerleaders for this counteroffensive were members of the State Department, in particular Victoria Nuland, who runs Eastern European policy, in particular Ukraine policy, and she's very notorious in this, and Tony Blinken, Secretary of State, who has been closely identified ideologically with neocons like Victoria Nuland, and neocon think tanks like the Institute for the Study of War, which, by the way, that's actually the name of this big think tank that is a total neocon think tank, the Institute for the Study of War. And the neocons generally were just really excited about this counteroffensive and pushing it and pumping it and getting, and also demanding themselves that all these governments give up weapons. And the United States did, of course, give up a ton of weapons, and other countries said we can't. And very recently, just in the last few weeks, there's been sort of this emergency push by Ukrainian governments sending their foreign minister here, there, and yonder, and Zelensky to all these different countries, including Cyprus of all places. They went begging Cyprus on a special state visit for some, I think, some air defense guns. And I think Cyprus did not give them those guns. I mean, they mostly struck out. So they now have been saying, just in the week or two before the leaks, they were saying, we need guns for this counteroffensive. So anyway, the theory is, which I think is right, is that the people who want this counteroffensive are the American neocons in the State Department. Ukraine is willing to go along with it because they know they will not exist as a nation without the neocon support. But now we think, some of us think, that what happened with these leaks is that this is someone inside the Pentagon noticing that Ukraine is about to get completely wiped off the map in launching this counteroffensive that Victoria Nuland wants them to launch without the proper weaponry, without sufficient weapons. They will go up against the most effective artillery in the history of the world. The Russian artillery corps is unbelievable, and that's what they do. Most Ukrainians who've died have been blown up by artillery shells, not by getting shot with guns. The neocons, the State Department, we think, and Jake Sullivan, who's also identified or closely associated with the neocons, who's the NSA, the National Security Advisor, that little cabal, which is running this war, by the way, that's about 4 people who run this war, and I just named them and Biden, but they're the real intellectuals behind it. They're the ones who've been telling Zelensky, you need to launch a counteroffensive because we need to prove that the hundreds of billions of dollars everybody has spent on you was worth it. But they couldn't get the weapons from these other governments. These other governments started to see this war for what it was, which was a crock and a losing cause. And so most other governments did not give them these weapons. And so they couldn't launch this counteroffensive. But the neocons have no way of saying no to anything. We may have noticed this over the last 20 plus years, that neocons have no reverse gear. They can't even slow down. They have this plan to run the world, to dominate the world, which they laid out in 2001, that famous document. And
Project for American Century.
Yes, Project for New American Century, yes. And so there's a theory, which I think is probably right, that someone in the Pentagon saw what was about to happen because of these neocons' fanaticism, that Ukraine was going to launch this counteroffensive because they were being forced to by this freakish cabal in Washington, and maybe another 100,000 Ukrainian boys would get murdered on the battlefield and would lose anyway. So we think in the Pentagon saw this coming and leaked these documents to stop the counteroffensive from happening. And we'll see. I might actually be the case. If it was this kid, Jack Teixeira, this 21-year-old who was just frog walks out of his house. You can see video of it with these soldiers.
Yeah.
It looks like
He was just quietly reading the book on his
in his basketball shorts.
Yeah,
his t-shirt and basketball shorts.
Yeah, man. There were these.
Yeah, I mean,
deep roll up and yeah.
If it was him and he did that and he did it sort of, you know, consciously with that in mind, international hero, and that's how he should be considered.
Just like Snowden and Assange. And
I mean, even more heroic, because that is quite likely going to stop the most murderous war in decades.
Yeah,
Snowden and Assange didn't do that.
Yeah, they were after the fact. This is in the middle of things that actually can affect things. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what smart people on our side think about these documents, these leaks.
And it's just so disappointing that in the general discourse, the contents of these documents are not being discussed at all. The NSC spokesperson, John Kirby, was saying that journalists should not be talking about this at all. Washington Post, New York Times have just been only concerned in a manhunt and not concerned about these documents at all. They also reveal the casualty disparity, that it's like 7-1 Ukrainians to Russians dying, that the death toll is much higher than we were told before, probably, most likely, and that there are special forces from the US, the UK, and other nations directly involved on the ground in Ukraine, which is huge politically, right? Because no American would ever vote for that, or very, very few would.
Right. Yeah. U.S. soldiers might be shooting at Russians.
Yeah.
Or directing Ukrainian soldiers to shoot Russians. Although we're pretty sure that's been happening all along. The CIA and the Defense Department have almost been certainly running or authorizing certain operations by the Ukrainians. Although I have to say that one of the things that these leaks show is that that the State Department and the Defense Department, and State Department has been getting bad information from Ukraine.
Yes.
That the communications have not been so up and up, that they've been actually frustrated that this cabal I'm talking about has not actually gotten a lot of honesty from Zelensky and company. It's not surprising, since Ukraine was considered to be one of the most corrupt countries on earth at the time the war started. So some of the numbers, some of the bullshit, all the lies about how Ukraine is really winning the war, a lot of that is actually, it turns out, originated in Kiev and then was internalized, it looks like, by Western policymakers who actually came to believe this own bullshit. And they actually, I think, somewhere in their minds, they actually thought that Ukraine was somehow winning this war, and they convinced themselves of it. But you can kind of see that, like this ideology, in a sense, taking form. Within foreign policy, and then it takes on a life of its own. Yeah. But so this leaker, but then you can see that there obviously were smart people in the Pentagon who were not ideological, who were saying, yo, they're going to get slaughtered if they try this. And this leaker, we think, was one of them. And so he's there, thank God. And it's always the military. It's always people inside the military who save our asses every damn time. It's always because the military, they're the ones with the skin in the game. It's their lives that get lost, right? Or it's their friends' lives that get lost. They're going to be the ones who are going to put the brakes on imperial ambitions of intellectuals and politicians. So that's, once again, we see this, and you'll see some of the best analysis of U.S. foreign policy from career military people like Doug McGregor, like Scott Ritter. Lots and lots of them. A lot of people who work at the Naval War College, by the way, are like totally brilliant analysts and see these things more or less the way that I do, actually. So it's really interesting. But God bless Jack Teixeira, and I hope that these leaks end the war immediately, because Bakhmut is about to fall, really is about to fall, because we have Russian soldiers. There's a video of Russian soldiers inside the center of Bakhmut near the railway station. They haven't quite captured the railway station, but once they do, it's over. But they're within shooting distance of the railway station, which is dead center of Bakhmut. They have captured already some of the administrative buildings. Unless there's just some radical turn of events, unless NATO sends in ground troops or something crazy happens, Bakhmut is going to fall, and then the counteroffensive will be launched shortly after that, because Bakhmut, it's widely considered to be like just a preparation in a sense for the counteroffensive on both sides, that Ukraine is trying to just buy time with this Bakhmut stand to prepare for the counteroffensive, to get the guns, to get the weapons that they need for it, which they now failed to do. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in Bakhmut, but I would imagine it's going to fall pretty soon. I don't know. I mean, the whole Ukraine project is falling apart now, because they simply got outgunned and didn't get the help that they needed to sustain this thing. And thank God. I mean, I wish it had ended, at the beginning. I wish it had never started, but thank God it might be in its last legs.
Yeah, my only concern though is that I believe this hasn't shifted the bipartisan consensus on foreign policy at all. Like in this last week, I believe since the leaks came out. I mean, Joe Manchin just made his trip to Ukraine, just like every other foreign official in the United States has. Lindsey Graham is still talking the way he talks all the time, explicitly saying we can fight this to the last Ukrainian.
MAGA, of course, has been totally solidly against it from the beginning.
Vindicated. Marjorie Taylor Greene has been great on this. Jack Posobiec has been great on this ever since the leaks.
Matt Gaetz mostly. Yes, Matt Gaetz has been the best. Well, all of them. They've all been perfect on it. Yeah. Which sucks because they kind of suck in other ways, but not Matt Gaetz though. I'm kind of a fan of Matt Gaetz actually. But anyway, I'm trying to think if has there been anybody defecting or even expressing any skepticism about it? No, not in the establishment, not in the establishment parties.
Because the Pentagon tells you not to look at it. So why would you look at it? Why would you disobey the Pentagon?
Yeah. I mean, again, this is all part of the American Empire project, and NATO, the expansion of NATO, which has been, that's part of the American political religion since the beginning. So, I mean, you don't go against that. I mean, this is NATO, for God's sake. You don't get in the way of that. It's religion. It's an evangelical religion that has been required for membership in the political class since 1776. It's just no doubt about it. Yeah. And you're not allowed to hold elective office without being pro-imperialist American empire. I mean, there's not a mayor even, really. Well, maybe the mayor of Berkeley. Okay. But I mean, certainly no Congress people, or even the squad, these like alleged, pro-Palestinian radicals. Please, like, they've all voted to help Israel. They supported the Ukraine war. They voted for the Ukraine war solidly all the way through, every goddamn one of them. I mean, even if the squad is American imperialists, come on now. I mean, we know this, that you must abide by that religion, the religion of the empire, to hold elective office, certainly on the national level. It's really something else. I mean, by the way, even MAGA, I mean, yeah, they're opposed to these particular wars, but they want America to be the dominant power. They don't want meddling directly. They want a lot less meddling directly in other countries, but they want America to be the dominant power. This is why Trump raised the military budget to a record level. And they certainly want to have, a dominant Navy in the Pacific to counter China, not counter China, but to back China down. So yeah, I mean, even those guys, they're still American imperialists.
So again, fans of the show will know that I get my news largely from, there's a local country station that plays Fox News every hour on the hour. And that's a good way to know what the general narrative is.
Yeah.
And they don't talk about the Pentagon leaks at all, but what they have been talking about all week, like every hour on the hour? Lindsey Graham and the Republican Senate investigating the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and officials at the Pentagon saying that the Taliban is taking power again in Afghanistan, and there's going to be another 9/11 in 6 months if we don't invade Afghanistan. And that is what is being told to Red State America right now, every hour on the hour.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Reinvasion of Afghanistan. I mean, thankfully, that has zero chance of happening, but that they would, I mean, just think about that. What kind of person would think of that right now? I mean, that's a religious zealot. I mean, there's no way there would be a vote for that, to send troops back to reoccupy Afghanistan, especially now that, I mean, that would be a real war because the Taliban actually controls the government this time. You know, I mean, my goodness, they didn't control the government the first time. I mean, that would be, they control the military. You want to go to war with the Taliban military? Holy crap. Okay, you're a complete lunatic, Lindsay.
Well, instead of winning the war in a year and a half like we did last time and then staying for 20 years, we'd win the war in 5 years and then we'd stay there for another 40 years. And then, you know, when we withdraw, we'll give the country right back to the Taliban again and then start over in 2 years.
But would people ever get to vote in that 40 years? Would there be like ever an election or something? Like, would they get a blue thumb or whatever? You know, I mean, because then it's worth it. Then it's worth it. As Madeleine Albright said, 500,000 dead children or whatever, you know, it's worth it for the chance to vote in an election. You know, God, I mean, I know I live for that, except that I haven't voted since Walter Mondale in 1984. That was the last. I forgot to mention that. That was the first and the last time I voted. 1984 when I was 18.
Wow.
All right. What's next? I want to go to the next topic. I'm ready.
Speaking of voting, what seems to be a very obvious entry into the 2024, potentially 2028 presidential run in the Democratic field. Gavin Newsom, your governor, has apparently solved
love Gavin.
He has solved all of the problems in California, and due to his benevolence, has decided to solve all of the problems in our red states. And he is cleaning up Florida just the same way that he cleaned up California. And he famously made a trip there. And, you know, apparently Florida is such a fascist state where dissent isn't allowed and books are banned. But apparently he's able to film what amounts to a campaign ad here. So this is what,
right.
This is the tip that Gavin Newsom's been on.
I'm here in Sarasota, Florida at New College, and we're here just to remind everybody of what's happening in Florida and other states like it. Guys like Ron DeSantis, these functionally authoritarian leaders passing bills like Don't Say Gay, threatening classroom instruction, criminalizing teachers, criminalizing librarians, banning books, banning speech, coming to colleges like this and taking over the universities. This is a university that has historically practiced academic freedom, focused on self-directed education, critical thinking. Now the college has been completely torn asunder with a direct assault with the firing of its president. The DeSantis administration has been pretty honest about what they intend to do, to use this college as a proxy to take over other institutions of higher learning. Ron DeSantis is nothing more than a bully. He bullies vulnerable communities, tries to humiliate people, talking down to people, talking past people because they look different, they love different. That's weakness masquerading as strength. And if you think this is not about you, it is. This is a preview of things to come. They want to bring us back to a pre-1960s world. Coming to colleges like this and taking over the universities to instill their version of ideological rigidity, not freedom.
Real quick, man, that is such confession by projection right there. You know, how these Republicans are so famous for the long march through institutions. And, right?
Did he say, wait a second, did he say that somebody's taking over the universities? We can't allow that to happen.
Oh my God.
I mean, can you imagine someone taking over a university? Like, you mean like a political movement, like a political ideology taking over the universities? Can you imagine? Can you imagine that, Michael, living in a world in which that would happen? I mean, wow. I don't want to live in that world, and I certainly don't want to teach. I certainly don't want to teach in one of those universities when that happens.
What a novel and a destructive concept that Ron DeSantis just thought up 6 months ago.
Right. Let me see. The government owns the schools. I run the government. What should we do with the schools? I mean, this is democracy, guys. This is what you want. Remember, elected representatives get to decide what happens in the schools. That's what democracy is. Ron DeSantis is being extremely democratic. And by the way, he's most likely representing the majority of his citizens in what he's doing with these schools. They don't want certain things being taught in their schools that they pay for. that they own, that they control. The people of Florida in a democracy own and control those schools. Don't they get to choose what's taught in them? And here's how we find that out. When it's California and they own the schools, the universities here, the public universities, and someone tries to inject some conservative or libertarian ideas into the curriculum, what do you think happens then? So, this is ridiculous. I don't get it. I thought we were pro-democracy, Gavin. You're like going, not only that, Mr. Imperialist, he's like a missionary. He's going to other countries. He's going to foreign countries to convert the natives. And the first thing you have to do is point out the evil of their leader. Your leader is evil. I will replace him. I will be the good father. This is how all imperialist ventures begin. They send missionaries. This is true. They send missionaries first to convert the natives, and then the military follows right after that.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, I've told you about this before, but in the great state of Indiana here, there were billboards on the highways from the California government saying that as Indiana is passing anti-abortion laws, that your right to an abortion is always safe in California. Go to ca.gov/abortion, something like that, for more information on this.
Yeah. This whole thing about public, like what liberals love, they think they love public education until someone else controls the public part. It's amazing. Like, what do you think public education in a democracy means, guys? It means those who are elected determine what is taught, doesn't it? And haven't you banned ideas and books? You think they allow all? You think the bell curve would be allowed in public libraries in California, in public school libraries in California? No.
Well, again, just look at what happens when conservative speakers. Look at what happens when Ann Coulter goes to Berkeley.
Well, then there's that.
Yeah.
Then they call it the Red Guard.
Yeah. But again, look at all these sad, hunched over women of color. Doesn't that negate your entire argument?
Well, they do look pretty sad. And I feel the urge to help them, to save them.
But we also have to push back, and we have to act anew. And that's why I encourage you to join us.
Oh, they're singing now.
Oh, he's getting hugs from the black ladies. Oh, the singing. Church singing. There we go. Justin Pearson in the house. Yeah.
The unedited video of that is one of the most embarrassing things ever, too. Just the most cringeworthy little assembly you've ever seen.
Here's the thing, though. I think Gavin might be the next president. I don't know. I mean, because here's what Gavin Newsom is.
And here's the thing. I really didn't want to play this story because I don't want to speak things into existence. And just saying the name Gavin Newsom over and over again is enough to increase his likelihood of becoming president.
It's true. This is true. You're going to manifest the Gavin Newsom presidency if you keep talking. What Gavin Newsom is a younger, better looking, smarter, somewhat more charismatic version of Joe Biden. That's what he is. With a slightly more left politics, although Biden these days is totally down with the woke mob too. But so I mean, even nowadays their politics is basically identical. And he's just a more appealing Joe Biden. And he's very polished. I think, he speaks with a forked tongue, but he does it well. I mean, I think his game is pretty solid. I don't think he's the most brilliant politician, but he's certainly better than Biden and Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg and all the rest of them. I mean, to me, he's got the most juice of any Democrat these days to run for president. And I think with everything that they've done to Trump and are going to continue to do to Trump, and the whole fight with DeSantis, and DeSantis I don't think has a chance anyway. And this is obviously what this is. This is the beginning. This is the first week of the Newsom-DeSantis election campaign cycle. But
it's pro wrestling. It's pro wrestling. You call out the heel. This is.
I kind of want it. I kind of want Gavin to be the president so I can oppose him every single day, because he's my favorite. He's my favorite whipping boy. We're the same age and we grew up both in the Bay Area. The similarities end there, but and he's just the most corrupt, slimiest, most hypocritical, paternalistic, nice guy I've ever known.
Yeah. This is one of the reasons why I don't want to stop talking about COVID. is because like he was one of the worst governors on that issue. He was one of the most transparently hypocritical governors on that issue too. And again, because it's so distasteful, people want to move on. I don't think that's going to be in people's consciousness come 2024 or 2028, you know.
I was thinking about
the rug,
his baggage. Yeah, I was thinking about his baggage, you know, which everybody's going to pour over when he runs for president. And that'll be front and center, I'm sure. The French Laundry scandal when he did not wear a mask at this dinner at the height of the COVID craziness, and when he was when there was a mandate, statewide mandate that he was imposing and talking about every day how important it was. I mean, thank God COVID does feel like a distant memory now. Thank God. But, you know, it isn't that long ago. And that will be the thing they talk about. I don't see that as life threatening for a presidential aspirant. You know, I don't, there's not, so far there's not. And then there's, of course, the whole shape of his career that he was the patron of, or his patron was the Getty oil family.
Yes.
That his entire political career has been paid for by this oil, by the heirs of this oil company, the Getty family, which is the most wealthiest and most powerful family in California in my lifetime, through my lifetime. Yeah, oil money. I mean, Mr. Climate Change is what got you here. And other than that, I mean, I don't know of any scandals. And he certainly looks the part, and he's pretty articulate. You know, he's like a poor man's white Barack Obama.
But the French Laundry thing is one thing with the hypocrisy, which will destroy him on the left, or it'll damage him on the left, like it did with Boris Johnson. But the bigger point that should be made is how much the lockdown policies destroyed the economy of California, and how hypocritical they were, and how much they went after businesses, and how it was impossible to own a restaurant in California during those years, and how many people left the state of California to go to places like Florida and Texas.
Yeah. No, true. That would be the smart Republicans will talk about that. Yes. Like, and oh, well, goodness, you know what they're going to have a field day with is our cities. There's going to be GOP camera crews stationed in San Francisco, just taking nonstop footage, right, of that city, and LA, like Skid Row, which is like a mile by mile square in downtown LA. It looks like zombie land. They're going to have, I mean, the cities in California are just apocalyptic. At least portions of them are apocalyptic. And the roads are incredibly rutted. I mean, the infrastructure here is just totally falling down. Trump was right about all that. It doesn't look good, man. Any tourist who's been to San Francisco or LA recently knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's like this was the most beautiful city in America 20 years ago, and had been forever, pretty much. And now it's almost uninhabitable. And there's the downtown, all the downtown skyscrapers are empty now because of COVID, because of all the mandates, because of the lockdowns, and because of the homeless, the 20 or 30,000 homeless people who live there in the downtown area of the most beautiful city in America. They did that. Liberals did that. Democratic Party, Gavin Newsom and his buddies in the Democratic Party. Dianne Feinstein was largely responsible for much of this. Pelosi, but Feinstein was a San Francisco local politician for years and years and years before she was in the Senate. And she's responsible for a lot of this. But yeah, so I would actually like that. I would like to have that debate because I want to help my city badly. It kills me. I love it very much. I loved growing up here. It was the best part of my childhood, was being here. It's an incredible stroke of luck that I was born here. And then when I came back to live here 4 years ago, it was just a different place. And it's really despairing, or I am despairing when I look at it. So yeah, I'd love to have this debate with Gavin. Let's go.
Yeah.
I'd love to be his daily opponent.
I do skip most elections as well with my anarchistic credentials and all that. But every day I think back to my trip to San Francisco and my trip to Portland. And I think, man, nothing makes me want to vote down ticket Republican for the rest of my life, not even look at the candidates, than remembering what those cities are like.
Oh, yeah. No, we would be much better off if Republicans controlled this city since the 1960s instead of Democrats. There's no question about it. I mean, the reason that rents are so high is directly a consequence of Democratic liberal rent control policies, which every economist will tell you. All that does is raise the rents for everybody, you know? So, I mean, then there's all these zoning laws that prohibit high density housing, which also makes this place unaffordable. All of what San Francisco, west of downtown, basically 3/4 of the city is single family dwellings because the city effectively doesn't allow anything bigger than that to be built. And you wonder, in the most beautiful city in America, you wonder why it's so expensive to live there, right? Because there's never enough supply for the immense demand of people who want to live here. And that's true in Berkeley and Oakland too. There's a lot of zoning and rent control that has destroyed this place. And then, giving literal handouts to the homeless, encouraging them, and then giving them, in Berkeley, they give them solar panels and they give them porta potties, and Oakland too, maybe even San Francisco, they help them be homeless in the middle of the city. And it's always like right around downtown too. Mm-hmm. That was liberal Democratic Party policies. And it's resulted in the near destruction of a place I really love, which would be the best. This used to be unquestionably the best place to live in the United States. And now it's almost unlivable. I mean, that's what they did to it, to my hometown.
We didn't talk about this during the show last week, but Bob Lee recently, that tech CEO for Cash App, being stabbed to death in broad daylight.
I mean, so I lived in New York for 17 years. I lived in Los Angeles for 8 years. I have always felt the least safe here in San Francisco, Oakland, and Berkeley. There's always been an anarchic element here, even in the 70s and 80s, that has been sometimes wonderful and sometimes really dangerous. There seems to be more of that kind of random street crime here than you get certainly in New York. New York is far, far safer. I mean, I never even thought about crime after Giuliani was mayor. Giuliani really did eliminate crime in New York for most people. It became a non-issue. But here, no, it's still, boys. Well, you were there. I mean, downtown San Francisco is like the Wild West nowadays. People can walk into stores and walk out with anything they want. No one will stop them. And there are psychotic, schizophrenic, drug addicted, homeless people who live in the streets and flail about manically all day, every day, living literally like animals. And there's tens of thousands of them. Yeah, it's a complete catastrophe. I don't know. Yeah. So let's go talk, Gavin. Go run for president, and then we can talk about that. There's going to be just much more attention paid on my home state, thank God, if he runs for president. And we'll have a much more vigorous debate, and we probably will have good policies resulting from that, because more people will become aware of the connection between liberal policies and urban blight, which is what we are facing now. The direct consequence, not if people blame it on tech, which is so ridiculous. They blame the problems here with tech somehow. It's like, no, tech didn't create the homeless city in downtown. Tech didn't impose these restrictions on housing that jack up the prices. No, none of that was tech. So let's have this conversation. I'd love to.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And then here's the thing that scares me about Gavin Newsom. I believe the suburbs have already been primed to vote for him, with Matthew McConaughey getting into politics kind of slightly. Remember,
kind of looks like
all the last few years, Matthew McConaughey has been brought out as like some sort of wise sage expert whenever there's a school shooting in Texas, or whenever he has a book out, to be the radical, the moderate guy out there. So I'm not putting it past them for that to be part of the longer play,
Right. Yeah, and they look alike, McConaughey and Gavin.
Yeah,
I think similar hair too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, Hollywood will love Gavin. I mean, they already do. Sorry. I mean, we know that Hollywood saved him in the recall. We tried to recall, and I say we because I was part of the campaign, and I very enthusiastically signed the recall petition for Newsom during COVID. He survived it. He won the election, but Hollywood poured millions and millions of dollars into his anti-recall campaign, and poured
he was up
millions
against
of dollars
that. He was up against that white supremacist Larry Elder.
Right. Well, that was right. So yeah, right. Yeah, he's got some karma coming back to him. Mm-hmm. He needs to pay. I mean, it's incredible that he would do what he did during COVID and think he could run for president. We can't let that happen.
Yeah.
I mean, we're forgetting too soon. Like, he was just about the worst governor. on this, and now he thinks he's cool to run for president. Now let's talk about his record, and let's do that. Can't wait.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Yeah, him and Whitmer, yeah.
Massachusetts, I think Massachusetts was maybe a little bit worse, but not much. We were pretty terrible here. Pretty terrible.
Yeah. Sweet. I think we're good to wrap up now.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Well, so right now, Michael and I are going to go to Unregistered Live, which is our weekly show where we hang out with people in a Zoom meeting right after Unreported, every Thursday night. And this is for every patron of Unregistered. And to become a patron, go to patreon.com/unregistered. And if you join at any level, any tier level, you can join us at Unregistered Live, which is a ton of fun. We hang out, we do all sorts of things. It's unrecorded. So therefore people don't have to censor themselves. And it is, what else? Just loose and freewheeling. And oh yes, you can be totally anonymous and you don't have to show your face. You don't have to turn on your video. If you would like, you can just come and watch. And it's probably, I think it's fun for a lot of people just to watch. So there you go. Michael, thank you. This was great.
Yeah, we got to say Icarus Fest. We're solidifying our
Icarus Festival. So this is truly the event of the year. We have now 13, I think, speakers lined up. Very big time speakers in our world. We got Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate, Michael Tracy. We got Ben Burgess, Jeremy Kaufman. Who else do we have coming?
Sam Husseini.
There's
one guy asking good questions at the State Department. We've got him.
Yeah. It's going to be amazing. We're adding more speakers all the time. We are going to be screening some films. We are now finishing negotiations with distributors. Some very big films, some very controversial films. We're going to have panel discussions. We're going to have live podcast recordings. We are going to have probably stand-up comedy as well. We're also working on that. So this is going to be a 4-day event, June 8th to the 11th in Rutherford, New Jersey, at the William Carlos Williams Center, which is this wonderful multi-stage performing arts center. It's 25 minutes from Manhattan, and we are working with them to put on this festival, the Icarus Fringe and Film Festival, first annual. We hope to make this every year. And it's going to be totally amazing. So go to icarusfest.com to get all the information and to buy your tickets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the pre-sale ends next Monday. We gave it another week. The pre-sale on its own is the best deal you're ever going to get, but we've got a promo code Icarus 2023 to get you an additional 10% off of those already amazing prices. Ooh. There's no festival like this that's set up like this that is as low as it is being offered right now.
For real.
And then
we're talking about hundreds of dollars in savings. Mm-hmm. So you got to check it out. Yep.
Yeah, and we will be announcing the lineup pretty soon, the official schedule of events, and potentially offering day passes. So, stay tuned. Yeah,
lots to come. Yeah, it's evolving every day. It gets bigger and better all the time. So, awesome, man. Thank you, sir.
Cool. Sweet.
I'll see you on the other side.
See you on the other side.